Hello, and thank you for joining us. We're back in the studio again with Walter and Sonica Veith. We've been listening to their life story, and Walter was just telling us in our last episode about his stubbornness and his unwillingness to accept the truth. And God had struck you with sores, like Job.
One sore.
One sore.
One sore.
So, and we left you off at the last story with the sore on your leg. It's been there for a week. Tell us the rest of the story.
Well, when the sore finally disappeared, I accepted that I will accept by faith that which seems unclear to me, but I certainly need some more evidence because I want the facts. Now, prophecy and the study of prophecy had convinced me about the historic aspects and the little horn aspects, and the book of Revelation was very, very convincing. Once you understood Daniel, then you could understand the beasts and all of these issues. So that was not too much of a problem. That was stimulating. I tried to prove it wrong with the theology faculty at the university right at my disposal. I tried desperately to prove it wrong, but failed. And so the only issue that was really still bothering me was evolution, until I had gathered enough questions and enough answers to say there is reasonable cause for doubt. I was perhaps fortunate in the sense that we at the university often had creationists speaking at the university. And we in the zoology department, we considered them fair game. And we didn't mind them coming because we had a great time ridiculing what they said once they left. And so I don't know whether they ever made an impact or not, probably did on some people, but not on the science faculty. And so, you know, when these issues came up, I knew what their arguments were. And their arguments used to irritate me. So I had to find new arguments because theirs weren't going to satisfy me. They would always look at the windows. They'd look at the furniture of the evolutionary theory. In other words, they'd shoot out a window. The bombardier beetle. How did it come into existence? How did it do this, that? It had to come together fortuitously. You know, one little thing there. How did this happen? How did that happen? So what they were basically doing is taking pot shots at the evolutionary theory. And all right, here a window goes, but so what? The structure is still in place. They're not going to bring the structure down. So I started concentrating more on the very foundations of the theory, natural selection. And the issue of natural selection, is natural selection a good way of bringing about evolution? And then finally you come to the conclusion that natural selection is a pretty poor deity because it cannot create anything. It can only select between what is already there. So it doesn't answer the question where anything came from. So these were the big issues that looked into the question of probability. Where do genes come from? All of these things. Until I had enough information to say, well, given all the other information, because it's now not only evolution versus creation on the scale. We now have prophecy on the other scale. We now have history on the other scale. We now have all of these issues plus a fair amount of experience already on this other scale, and the scale was tipping in favor of the biblical account. And so I made a choice that even though I don't know everything, if God is concerned about us, He will reveal it in His time. And we decided to get baptized. And then, when that decision was made, everything went haywire. Yeah, I was driving a worker home, and how old was Robert?
About 3 years old.
About 3 at that stage. He's sitting on the back seat, and I'm driving this person home, and I'm driving on a highway, and there's a car behind me, and I'm going to turn right. So I'm in the right lane. There's a whole lane left over on the side of me where this vehicle can pass. But I can see in my rear view mirror, he's looking at what's happening on some farm there next to the highway. And I'm thinking to myself, this guy's traveling a bit fast and he's in my lane, and he should be going over to the other lane to go past me. Here's something coming. And while I'm thinking this, the little 3-year-old is sitting upright in the back. It's an old Volkswagen Beetle in those days. And his head is about in line with the window at the back. And as I'm thinking this, he falls asleep. He just falls over on the chair and falls asleep. And I'm watching this because I'm watching the rear view mirror now. And I see this car is going to greet me at a speed from behind. So I take that right turn and I go off the road so that he can't hit me. He gets such a fright as he sees that he could have hit me. Instead of plucking the wheel to go past me, he plucks it in the wrong way and he follows me. Wipes out our car. Wipes it out. The back window goes flying out. The front seats both break up to the back because of our weight and the impact. Strange, we didn't have any whiplash, nothing. It was the seats broke. So he just went whack down, and the little kid was asleep. And the whole back of the car was bent in, and there was just one little space where the kid lay. So if he had not fallen asleep at that very moment and fallen over, it would have taken his head clean off. So that was the end of that vehicle. Fortunately, I still had another vehicle. So we got baptized. But my situation at the university was impossible. My colleagues were growling. They were looking at me as though I'd gone insane. And eventually I decided, because at this university, evolution was central to the teaching. It wasn't just a theory that was an add-on. It was central to the whole curriculum. Every course was presented phylogenetically via the evolution theory. I couldn't do that anymore. And so I handed in my resignation. And the professor called me in and he said, I don't think so. I think you just have to modify your ways. And I said, no, I don't think so. I don't think I can compromise. And so he said, well, you'll discuss it with the leadership. And so I was called in to the rectorate. And I still remember going home and saying to my wife, I've been called in to the rector and I don't have any decent clothes to wear. I hate suits. You know what I'm wearing now? I hate it. Don't wear suits. Jeans, t-shirt, that's it. That's how I gave my classes. That's how I went through my student years. Why change now? But all of a sudden I had to go and see the rector. And so I had no choice. I went and bought my first suit, much to my disgust. And then I went and had a talk to the rector. And the rector wanted to know what was going on in my mind. And I explained to him that I don't feel that I could compromise to the point where I teach something which is not the truth and teach it as though it were the truth. And so he said, well, can't you just teach it and not believe it? Or can you not, for the sake of your work and all of these, just compromise on this issue? So I said, no, it's not possible. And then he said to me, who has the truth? And I was taken aback and I said, well, I think the Bible has the truth. He says, no, I didn't mean that. I mean, who do you say has the truth? And I said, well, I think Christianity has the truth. He says, no, I don't mean that. I said, who do you think has the truth? And I could hear the cock crowing. And I wanted to say, but I said it. I said, I think the Seventh-day Adventists. And he said, thank you. I wish you all the best for your future life. That was it. End of conversation. And so I left the university. And I thought to myself, now what do we do? And I decided, well, what am I good at? I'm good at animals. I'm a zoologist, animal husbandry. Maybe I can buy a tract of land, sell my house. Maybe, buy a bigger one, go into partnership with somebody and start a dairy farm.
Oh, so you were still eating dairy then?
Oh, sure. God has a sense of humor, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
And so we put our house on the market at a good price. And the very first person to walk in was a Springbok rugby star. Mm-hmm. In other words, he was playing rugby for the national team. And he took one look at the house, didn't haggle, bought it. That was it, was gone. And then, the other thing is, I started going to church, but I'd never been to church with a suit, right? And the first thing when I came to church, I saw all these people sitting there in their suits, and I still said to myself, never. When I was in the Catholic Church, I never wore a suit. I won't wear a suit now. I will not compromise to this level. Going in my jeans, if they don't like it, they can lump it. But then when I went to that rector, and I went and bought a suit to go and see the rector, the next time I went to church, I thought to myself, you know what? Now you're going to the King of the Universe. Before you went to the rector, you wore a suit. And now you're going in jeans and t-shirt? So I thought, well, if the suit's good enough for the rector, it's good enough for church. So I started wearing a suit. Still don't like it, but I wear it. Not because I think it gets you brownie points, but because it's a sign of respect. If I could pay it for a rector, why not for someone? I'm not being prescriptive. It's a personal thing. Anyway, we sold the house. The guy bought it. And we went into partnership. There's no ship that sinks like a partnership. Did you know that? We bought a farm in a partnership. And we moved out into the country. But I had to still work for 3 months for the university. We only had one car left now. The other one was written off. So we moved to the farm. And my dear wife had to start farming. I couldn't farm yet because I still had to work for 3 months, 1 term, at the university. So I stayed with this carpenter friend, and, well, that's where I lived for 3 months. Now the interesting story is, every weekend I went through to the farm. And when I got to the farm, I used to help her and then drive all the way back to the university. And it was about how far, Sonica?
3 hours maybe?
About 3 hours drive there and 3 hours drive back. And one day I'm driving there and I drive on a road, which is a free road for me to drive. And a headmaster in a little town comes roaring along, doesn't stop at the stop street. He's distracted by whatever, wipes me out, my car, totally written off. Now I'm sitting over there. All my money that I had, I invested in this farm. And 2 other partners invested another third. each. So I had a third share, and the others had a third share. And one of the partners asked me to take a loan for him, which I did, and the other one developed the farm. So each one had an equal share. But I didn't have a vehicle now anymore. And my money was invested in this place, and I still had to go to university. So where do I get a car? I haven't got money to buy a car right now. So I went to some backstreet dealer, and I rented a car. Rented a backstreet dealer's car, which was a bit rickety, but it worked. And then started driving with this car. And then in those 3 months, everything that can go wrong did go wrong. So for example, if you start a dairy farm, then you have to buy a herd of dairy cattle. So we'd arranged a herd of dairy cattle, and the one partner who was investing in the infrastructure, he bought the herd, but the herd stayed where it was because you need a milk tank and the facilities and all of these which were forthcoming. And the dairy company has to supply the tank. So the dairy company phones me and says, your tank has arrived. So I said, that's good news. When are you bringing it? They say, this afternoon. I said, that's great. So we can have the herd delivered? So they said, yes. Now I'm not at the farm yet. She's at the farm. So they deliver this herd with a huge trucks. And this 20 dairy cattle come onto the farm. All of them in milk production. And they arrive, and now I'm waiting for this tank, this cool tank, refrigerated tank. Phone the dairy company. I say, excuse me, the dairy cattle are now arrived. We need that tank because this evening these cows will be milked for the first time. Oh, sorry, we've made a terrible mistake.
What?
We made a terrible mistake. This tank wasn't really for you, it was actually for someone else. I said, excuse me? So what happens now? They say, well, you can't have any deliverance of milk, nothing. I said, well, what do we do with the milk? We said, well, it has to go into a refrigerated tank, otherwise it's illegal. They said, yes, that's correct. So when can I get my tank? We don't know. About 3 months' time.
Oh, no.
Hello? We've got dairy cattle that have to be milked twice a day. What do I do with all that milk? That's our income. This is how we're going to live, right? Throw it away. It's illegal. You may not bring it in cans like in the old days. It's no longer legal. It has to be in a refrigerated, sterilized tank. I said, but this is not my problem, it's your problem. You deceived me. You said it was there and I can go ahead. So what now? So they say, all right, go to a neighbor, a few removed, and he's got a dairy herd and he delivers for us. And we'll close an eye. You milk your cows, put it into tanks, and then drive it to this guy and put it into his tank, and then he will take a cut for it, and we'll pay you out through him. Then it's he who delivers it, and then he's legal, and we'll close an eye for you. Okay. So now my poor wife, you tell them what you had to do.
So now I have to get up 4 o'clock in the morning, all alone. I've never milked a cow in my life before, and now I have to go and milk 20 cows. And I have a little, our youngest son, 3 years old. I have to wake him up, take him with me down to the cow shed. And now I can't get the cows to stand still because they don't know me. And so now I've got the one leg up against the cow, pushing her against the wall and trying to get the suction things down at the bottom onto her. And it was just a nightmare. They were stampeding us and they were just going wild. And so I had to do this twice a day, and I was exhausted. And so one day...
Now, what do you have to do with the milk?
Yes. Then I had to milk it into cans, old-fashioned cans. And then the only vehicle we had was an open Jeep. And now I have to get these cans this high, full of milk, onto the Jeep. So now I managed to get 2 or 3, I can't remember how many cans we had, and I managed to get it on there, but now it's raining. Now there's no roof on this Jeep. And now I've got to travel to the next farm and deliver it there, and got Robert wrapped in plastic bags to try and keep the rain out. But every day I did this, and I was exhausted because I was alone. And then one night I just fell asleep praying and asking God to help, because I wasn't coping. The next morning I wake up and it was misty, and here comes 2 people walking up through the mist, and I'm alone on the farm, and it's 2 men, and I'm thinking, it's a little bit scary because I have no protection. But they come up right up to the farmhouse, and they knock at the door, and they said, "We worked on a dairy farm. We would like some work. Do you have any work for us?"
I'm sure you said yes.
I said, "Yes, I have work for you." And so from there on, it was much easier. They handled the milking of the cows. But before they came, I actually delivered every day for, I don't know how long, couple of months. And all the milk went into the farmer's milk tank.
And then he'd measure how much it was, and we'd write it down. And so that in 3 months' time, when our tank arrives, then we'll settle this bill. And so for 3 months, this happened. And after 3 months, then I was finished at the university, and I moved to the farm. And I went to this man, and I said, "Good news, our tank has finally arrived. We're relieved of this burden. And here's the list, and all this milk that we've been delivered for 3 months in rain and shine and what have you. And you must tell me how much you want. You take whatever cut you think is fair." And he looked at me and he said, "What milk you talking about?" Have you had that sinking feeling in your life before? Now this is 3 months income, right?
Yeah.
So what milk you talking about? I said, "Come on, you know what we're talking about, the milk that went into your tank." He looks at me, he says, "You know that's illegal, don't you? You know that's illegal to put milk into another tank." So I said, "Yes, but we did it with the permission of the dairy. They said they would wink at it because it was their fault." He says, "I'm sure the government won't wink at it. I know nothing about any of your milk. Goodbye."
Oh no.
So he stole 3 months worth of labor and 3 months worth of pain. In any case, we decided, well, write it off. We'd planted some wheat, and wheat was growing beautifully. Thought God would make it up. And then a flock of birds came.
Mm-hmm.
It blackened the sky, and it took the wheat. And then what was left we had to harvest, but we didn't have a harvester, so we went to another farmer and rented it. And all the farmers around were weary of us, because we were these religious freaks, and it went around that we didn't go to church on a Sunday. And so I don't know whether they clubbed against us or what they did, but it was a nightmare. So this person comes and he starts harvesting the wheat, and he doesn't finish it, of course. It's about 3 days to finish it, so he leaves his harvester and he goes away. Next day he comes back and he wants to start harvesting. Nothing works. Machine won't work. And he starts investigating, and he looks, and they must have put 25 kilograms, a whole sack of sugar, into his tank because he was harvesting for us. So that was a total disaster. They cut our water line. We had to share water with people. They started cutting that. And in South Africa, many of the workers, unfortunately, because of history and all of these things, are weekend alcoholics. And so there's a lot of knife stabbing and fighting over the weekends. And one day I'm standing there and there's a knock on the door. What day was it? Was it a Sunday or a Saturday? It was a Sunday.
I can't remember.
It was a Sunday. And here stands this worker. I nearly died. Here he stands. He's got a knife in him.
Oh.
And the knife is through his eye here and through his nose and out the other side. He's got the knife in him. He's covered in blood everywhere. He's looking through the one eye. And I said, "What happened to you? What happened to you?" He said, his friend stabbed him. And he said, "I have to get to a doctor." I said, where's the man you're working for?" No, he'll never take us to the doctor. So I'm saying, well jump into this pickup, or what do we have at that stage? Pickup, jump into the pickup, I'll take you to the doctor. That's about 11 kilometers. So he gets onto the back and I'm driving off and he stops me and he says, No, don't drive. I said, "What's the matter? I thought this guy's dead, He's got a knife through him."
Yeah.
He says, "I must pick up my friend." I said, "What friend?" "No, the one who did this to me." I said, "Where's he?" "No, he's lying at his house there on the other farm." "And what's he doing there?" "No, I stabbed him in the back. He's lying there and he'll die if we don't take him too." So I said, "But where's your farmer who's supposed to do this? This is not my business." He says, "No, he'll never take care of them." So I said, "All right, let's go." So I went there and I drove into the top to the laborers, workers, and here he was lying on this little balcony. And he was lying on his stomach and the bubbles were coming out of his back as he was breathing. He'd been stabbed right through the lung. So he and I, this guy with a knife through him, and me, we take this guy and we put him on the back of my pickup. And now I'm roaring out of there to go to the hospital. I get to the farmer's gate, the gate's closed, and the farmer's standing there with a shotgun. I can't drive any further, I'm at the gate. Now this is my neighbor, right? My neighbor. So I stop, and he says, "What are you doing on my farm?" So I said to him, "I'm taking your laborer who's got a knife in his back, and the other one with a knife through his head, and they're sitting on the back, right? They're bleeding and the bubbles are coming out of this one's back. I'm taking them to the hospital." He looks at me, he says, "What are you doing on my farm? You're trespassing on my farm."
Oh, no.
I said to him, "Your laborer said you will never do it, and I'm doing a humanitarian deed. I'm taking your laborers to the doctor. Will you please open the gate?" So he shoves the shotgun in my face through the window and says, "What are you doing on my farm?" And he carried on. I don't know how long, it sounded forever, 10, 15 minutes, I don't know. Same question, all over and over and over. Eventually he said to him, "You know what, I don't care if you're going to shoot this stupid shotgun off now, but this laborer is dying on the back here. I'm going to put my foot down, I'm going to ride right through your gate. So you either open the gate now or I drive through it, or you shoot me, what's your choice?" And so he opened the gate. And I took his laborers to the hospital. And it wasn't 3 days later they were back on the farm. I don't know how they do it. They're tough as nails. He's got a hole in his back, right through his lung. I'd been in intensive care for him for 3 months, but these guys were back on the job. So these are the farmers that are around. So now we start farming. We lost the wheat crop virtually. Major expenses with this thing, with a harvester. Farmers all around they were obnoxious. They were absolutely horrendous. And I am starting a program of artificial insemination. I'm the zoologist, and I'm going to improve my herd now, and I'm going to use artificial insemination to do this. Wonderful. So I get all the little equipment and I start doing this, and it's quite a, there's a knack to it. And this farmer that stole the milk from us phones me. And he says, I hear you're doing artificial insemination. I said, yes. He says, I've tried, and I've got the veterinarian to do it, but it's very expensive. Would you do it for me? I look at my wife and I said, this man's got gall. He steals 3 months of milk, and then he asks me to come and help him with artificial insemination. What am I going to do about this? I think, okay, I'll heap some burning coals upon his head. Maybe he's got a conscience. I'll go and help him. So I go and help him. And I'm trying to teach him how to do it. Now, I've got long baboon arms, and they're nice and thin. So when you do artificial insemination, well, you have to wear long gloves for a reason, right? And you're not working in the front, you're working in the back, right? And so you have to go into the cow, and with the other one you've got this syringe with the whatever you need. And he's trying to learn from me, and I'm trying to teach him. But he's a stocky fellow with short, big, fat arms. He can't do it. He doesn't get in there, he doesn't get the right position, he hurts the poor cows, and he can't do it. And he blasphemes like crazy. Eventually he gave up the program, and I said to him, I can't do this for you all the time. Every time you phone me, you want me to come and do this. You must get your veterinarian. So I left it, and he carried on swearing like crazy. I don't have to tell you all the stories. There are some other interesting ones there. And I thought to myself, you know what? Life's not fair. These guys are all prospering. They steal you blind. They rob you. They still use you. They don't pay you. Not 1 cent did that man give me.
I was going to say, this is you as new Adventists, new
I'm
Christians, and yet all these bad things are happening to you.
And I've lost everything, right? And then in the midst of this was still in the 3 months. Everything is going wrong. Our milk's being stolen. Everything's going wrong. The battery of this rented little thing packs up. So she and I, we go to this place, and she's desperate already. We must have made a mistake. Because we're thinking, wow, now you've discovered the Bible, you've discovered truth, you're in line with prophecy, you're in harmony with God's law, you're doing everything, you've given up your work, you've sacrificed your career. What's in it?
God should honor that, right?
Yes,
God should repay you.
Exactly. See if I do not open the windows of heaven.
Exactly.
Great God, great windows. Milk stolen, harvesters broken, pipes stolen, you name it. Everything went wrong. And she's in tears, and now this car packs up. So we drive through to this place, and she's desperate. Have we done the right thing? Have we not done the right thing? And I go inside, and there's only one guy working there, and he's got a white overall on. And I said to him, the battery of this vehicle is packed up. I don't know whether it's the alternator or the battery. So he says, come, let's go and take the battery out and we'll test it. So we go to the car, he takes the battery out, and he and I go inside. In the meantime, that's your story.
In the meantime, a man comes to me. He's got a blue overall on, and he's got this very friendly, round face, friendly smile. And he comes to me and he says, your husband has a very powerful weapon in the car. And I say, no. Before we became Christians, we had a pistol, and everybody has a pistol. But
not a revolver, pistol.
A pistol, yes. And we sold it when we became Christians. And so I said, no, we don't have a weapon. And he said, yes, let me show you. And he took me to the car and he pointed to the Bible. Walter had his Bible in between the seats. And I said, oh, that weapon. And we started talking about the Bible. And he said to me, asked me, where do you worship? And I was reluctant to say, what we had become, because we were being mocked by our families. His family rejected him. My family rejected me because we became Seventh-day Adventists. And I was scared to tell him. And so I said, well, we worship up there on the hill. And he said to me, that's not what I mean. Where do you worship? And I thought, all right, if I say Helderberg College, he won't know what that is. And so I said Helderberg College. And he said, no, that's not what I mean. Where do you worship? And so just like with his story with the rector, I thought the cock was going to crow. And I said, well, we worship up there with the Seventh-day Adventists. And he was quiet and he stepped back. He took one step back and he pointed to me like this and he said, they have the truth after all. And then he turned around and he walked away. And at that point, Walter had come out with a man with a white overall, and they were standing at the car in the front. They were putting the battery back in, and this man with a blue overall was standing next to them at the car. And I was walking around thinking about what he had said, and it really intrigued me. And then we got in the car and we drove off. And I told him as we were driving, I said to him, this man came to me. And he said, what man? I said, the man with the blue overall. And he said, but there was only a man with a white overall. And I said, no, there was this man with a blue overall. He was standing right next to you at the car. And he said, no, there was one man with a white overall. So then he said, okay, if there was a man like that, he must have been, we will have to go and find out. Why did he say those things to me?
I said to her, he must be an Adventist, because why would he say they have the truth after all? So he's an Adventist, let's go and talk to him.
Let's go and talk to him. And so we drove back, turned back and went back. And we asked the man with the white overall, where's the man with the blue overall? And he said, no, I'm working alone today. There's no one here. And we looked for him. We went and looked in all the buildings there, and there was no one. And so we realized that God had used I think it was an angel that had come to strengthen me, because I was at that point wondering if we had made a mistake. I was really wondering if this was the truth. And the fact that he said to me, they have the truth after all, strengthened me, and I knew we can carry on.
Well, can things get worse?
In your life, probably yes.
They can get worse, yes. Both these partners of mine decided that life was too tough. And so one of them decided that the loan was after all not his but mine. And so off he went. And I inherited a loan, which I had no means of paying because I had no more income, right? Except what the cows were bringing. And the other one decided, well, if he goes, I go. And so I inherited his as well. And here I sat, up to my eyebrows in debt, and no means of repaying it. And at that stage, South Africa was in apartheid renewal. And so we were under sanctions. Interest rates shot up from around 5% to 36% per annum. There was no way I was going to repay those loans. So basically we had to put the farm on the market, lost it, and had no more money. And we were praying and saying how unfair all of this is. And these people that had stolen all our money and had done this and that and the other, there's some other interesting stories as well. Perhaps I can briefly tell the one about while we were still building the shed, there was an argument between the builder and a supplier of the bricks. And the supplier of the bricks, cement bricks, was also a farmer, and he wanted an advance. And the farmer said no. The builder said, no, you don't get an advance until the bricks come. So he said, I already had to sell my 2 cows for next to nothing to this other guy who had stolen our money, right? And I heard that, so I went to him and I said, "You've got 2 cows that you sold." He says, "Yes, the guy's robbing me blind. He's giving me 500 rand, which is what, $50 today, for these cows, and they're worth 2,000-3,000. I mean, I'm being robbed blind." So I said to him, "Well, if he gives you that, I'll give you double," which was still a good deal, right? And I needed to increase the herd because that's income. So I went and fetched his cows. In the meantime, this other farmer who had already robbed me blind phones and says, "I have 2 cows for you."
Oh.
And I said, "Wonderful, you've got 2 cows for me." Now, I already had the cows. I said, "Describe the cows to me." So it describes the 2 cows I already have. I said, "How much do you want for them?" I'm playing along, right? And he gives me 3 times the price than what the other guy paid. 4 times the price, sorry. And he says, "There's another man here that wants to buy them immediately, and he's standing here waiting, but I think that you being my neighbor, I should honor you first, therefore I want to give them to you." So now I start haggling with him over the price of the cows, but he doesn't want to come down. He says, "You've got to decide right now, because the man's right here and he wants to take the cows with him, and I really think you deserve the cows." But I've got the cows already. Eventually I let him off the hook and I said, "Sorry, you're describing the 2 cows I've already got, but you've caught me enough, not once more, thank you very much." So all sorts of stuff like that. And we were arguing and thinking, how unfair it is now. Everybody's ripping off everybody. And then that night, there was a storm. A terrific storm. Unbelievable storm. And the wind was howling. Oh, we must tell the other story as well, but I'll come to that. And the wind was howling like crazy. And nothing was broken on the farm. I thought the roof was going to go. But that farmer's sheds, you call it a shop, his shed's roof flew off. And it flew over the highway, was taken right over the highway, and fell onto his stud cows, his top cows. Killed them all, instantly. And I thought, well, that's a little bit of justice. A week or so later, he was pulling up a pump from a well, and he had a tripod set up, and he had the rope, and he attached it to his tractor, and then drives the tractor into the field, and it pulls up the pump, and then you service the pump. And for some reason, it came loose on the tractor, and of course it goes plummeting down the well, and that rope comes across that sand, and he tried to get out of the way, but he didn't manage, and it wrapped itself around his leg and broke his neck. But he didn't die, but he was a paraplegic.
Oh no.
And so there he is, he's in a wheelchair. I don't know what happened to him since then. But not that I wished that upon him or on anyone, but it just shows that there is a limit. How far you're going to go, how far you're going to blaspheme. There is a time when there is a reckoning. And we have to decide in our lives what side of the reckoning are we going to be on. And then when this farm didn't sell, when I couldn't sell it, the price went down, the mortgage was high. We were praying one night and we said, what are we going to do? I haven't got any more money. We've got nothing left to eat. Is God going to leave us here just like this? What are we going to do? And we sat down and we made a list, right?
You wrote a letter to God.
We wrote a letter.
Yes.
Have you still got that letter?
I don't know. I haven't seen it.
And she wrote down all the promises in the Bible, and we put it down and we said, we claim them. And the next morning, I get a phone call, and it's from the rector of the university. No, it's not the rector, it was the professor of another university. And he phones me and he says, one of my workers, one of my professors is sick. Could you take over from that person? And this is quite a long-term thing. It could be a year or so. Could you take over? So I said to him, yes, but you know what I teach. You know that I don't teach evolution. He says, I know that, and I've heard all that, but I just want you to teach the physiology. You don't have to do evolution. Is that fine? And I said, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. When? And he said, well, I'll put it through the committees. Maybe in a month, 2, I'll let you know. So I said to God, okay, thank you very much. Month 2, I'm dead. So I go out and I do whatever I have to do, come back. She calls me, she says, he's back on the phone. So I go back, he says, something strange happened. I went to the rectorate to put in the request that we process this appointment, and the rector was off to get financing from overseas. Says, no time for this, just appoint the man, no committees, and he signed. He said, you can start on Monday. Now this was a Friday. And this was now a bigger crisis. They're not having a job, because what are you going to do with the dairy herd that needs to be milked, that needs to be taken care of, and all of these issues? What are you going to do with them? And so we're still thinking about this, and there's a knock on the door. You tell that.
There was a couple from Zimbabwe. In those days it was still Rhodesia. And they had been working on a farm, but they were keeping the Sabbath. And the owner of the farm wanted them to work on the Sabbath, and they refused. And so they were kicked off, just thrown off. They had nothing, they didn't know where to go. And they somehow had heard that we had a farm, and they wanted to know if they could come and help us. So the very next day they were standing there, they were ready for work, they knew how to work with dairy cows, and they said they didn't need any income. The only income they would need was from the cows, and they would take care of the farm. So within 24 hours we packed and we moved back to Somerset West. And
even worse, when we got back to Somerset West, you have to have a place to stay. I don't have any money to pay a place to stay. So somebody had, through some contact, heard that there was a house to rent, and this person said, I can pay not in advance, but after a month, which is fine, because then I'll have a salary from the university. So we rented a house, but we had no money for food, nothing. And our kids had to go to school, and they didn't have any clothes. You have to buy school clothes because they have school uniforms there. And so we went to the school, and the school said, oh, by the way, we have second-hand clothes here. Perhaps some of this will fit your children. And of course it did fit, and every child got his outfit, and they said, oh, we'll put it on the bill at the end of the month, no problem. So the children had outfits, but no food. And then we were driving along, and my daughter picks up something, and she says, what's this? And lying in the back of the car, which was closed up, there was an envelope, and in it was enough money to buy food. I don't know who put it there, whether it was a human or otherwise, but we got through that first month, and I went back to the university. And I just started at the university. Now remember, I still have many questions about evolution that are plaguing me, and I had a long list. And a man comes to me and he says he wants to sponsor me to go to geoscience in California so that I can go on a field trip with them to see the other side of the evolution-creation debate. And it'll be about a 6-week trip. And I said, well, I can't go. And he said, why not? So I said, well, I've just started at university. I can't very well go to the professor and say, hello, I've just started. Can I have 6 weeks off? Goodbye. He'll tell me, are you nuts? So I said, forget it. And so, thank you very much, but forget it. And then I started at the university, and I gave the first course. And then they had riots at the university. Massive riots. It was the apartheid turmoil. They were throwing stones. They were beating up students. It was horrendous. Eventually they had no choice but to close the university. And some students were writing exams and others not, so they partially closed the university to try to contain this. And those that had finished their exams were asked to leave campus. And my students had all written. So I went to the professor and I said, we have to leave campus. He says, you leave campus. I said, for how long? He said, 6 weeks. And that's when the course was going to start. And I said, what if it opens up? He says, you don't come back, 6 weeks. And I said, well, what must I do? Where must I go? He says, I don't care. Go to the moon if you want to, but I'll see you in 6 weeks. So I found this person and I said, is it still possible? He says, yes, they're starting right now. So off I went. I was in geoscience.
So God fixed it so that you could make it.
I was there for 6 weeks and I went through that course. And you know what's wonderful? In those days, everybody in this church still believed in the creation account. Not where we have so many skeptics as in this day. So I was in the field with godly people who were not only clued up in terms of the Bible, but were scientifically clued up people. Not fools, clued up people. People that worked for NASA, people that had high positions before that switched like I had switched. Mm-hmm. Intelligent people, and it was a wonderful experience. Going up Mount Hornaday, looking at Yellowstone National Park, the petrified forests, looking at the evidence for and against the creation account and the catastrophic account, and that swayed the balance. Catastrophism was the answer. Evolutionism didn't have a hope of even competing with that. And I came back to South Africa armed with this new information.
And it was information you'd seen firsthand.
Firsthand. I'd been out in the field with people that still believed it with their whole heart and with their whole mind.
Isn't it beautiful how God arranged it for you to be able to have your last questions answered?
It's a miracle. It's actually a miracle.
Why do you think God allowed all those bad things to happen right when you had become new Christians?
Dependence. I was totally independent. I worked my way through university myself. If my family didn't want to pay, I'll do it myself. I'll work weekends, I'll work night shift, I'll do what it takes. I'll starve. I even ended up in hospitals, starving.
As a student?
As a student. Yeah. But I was going to do it, and I needed no one, and I needed no one's help, and I needed to depend on no one. And if I don't have food, I'll eat my shoes, but I'll ask no one. And God arranged it that I couldn't do that anymore. I had to start leaning on His arm, because there was no way I could cope with the waves that were coming my way now.
And you even took the farm with the attitude that you were going to do this and that, based on your knowledge, based on your experience as a zoologist, you could do it.
Exactly. Oh, by the way, I forgot the story. Her father, while I was gone, had an aneurysm. Now, you must tell that story.
He was in the train on his way to work, and fortunately he wasn't killed immediately, because he should have been dead. But he fell forwards, and he managed to, the wound was closed a little bit by his force.
The main artery. The aorta was blocked when he fell forward.
Yes. So he had a lot of damage. He lost parts of his feet and parts of his bladder and things like that. And he was never the same after that. He was very sick, very, very sick. And when he came out of hospital, he was in such a bad shape. He went to his home. My stepmother took him, but she never took care of him. And when I came to visit, he would be sitting in his wheelchair in total mess, because she wouldn't bath him, she wouldn't clean him, he couldn't go to the washroom by himself. And she was in her room speaking to the entities that were appearing to her. And when she was in her room, nobody was allowed to disturb her. And so that one day I came, and he was sitting in his wheelchair, and he had this soft voice, and he was so weak And he begged me to just clean up the place because it was in such a mess, and he was so, he was so embarrassed that he was in this state. And I said to him, would you like to come home with me? I'll take care of you. And he said yes. And so I immediately started taking him with me, and she came storming out of her room, and she shouted at me, and our 3 children were in the car waiting, and she stormed past me, and she went straight to them in the car, and she started cursing them and telling them that she hopes they're miserable for the rest of their lives, and just cursing them. And I was so upset, but I kept on taking my father. I just didn't look at her. I just wheeled him out with his wheelchair, took him home, and I started taking care of him. And in the time that Walter was at that stage, he was overseas, so I was taking care of him by myself. He was a little bit more ready to listen. I started playing tapes. In those days we had tapes.
About the bed sores he had.
Yes, he had huge bed sores. They were enormous, and they were so deep, right down to the bone. The people in the church were so nice to us. They brought us food, and they helped to nurse him. And I was able to speak to him a bit more about the Bible, and I started playing him some tapes. And he was listening, and he was asking more and more questions about what we believe. And up till today, I really believe the Lord allowed this to happen so that he could be more open to the Word and to the truth. But at one stage, he was in the lounge in his wheelchair, and I was taking care of the meal and the supper, and our youngest son was lying on the couch next to him. And then I heard, for the first time since we'd become Christians, I heard this piercing scream again. And I just froze, and I thought, what's happening now? I ran to the lounge, and he was lying on the couch, but he was looking past beyond my father. My father was sitting here, and he was looking beyond him, behind him. And he was screaming and looking and staring, and he said, take that purple thing away, just take that purple thing away. And I grabbed him and took him to my bedroom, and I was lying on top of him to try and protect him, and he kept on screaming, take this purple thing away. And he was looking over my shoulder, and I could feel my hair rise in my neck, and I was too scared to look, but I felt this terrible presence. And I said to him, the first thing I could think of was to say to him, say, Jesus, help me. And he was only 3 and something years old, and he said, Jesus, help me. And the next minute, it was like a wind that went past me and out towards the window. And he fell asleep, and he had a fever. He's got a fever again, but it wasn't so bad, and he fell asleep, and he slept that whole night. And I realized that I was not taking care. I was not praying enough. I was not being careful. I was so busy with my father that I was not praying for us as a family and for protection. And so I started praying regularly. I was alone. Walter wasn't there. And things went very much better. But soon, suddenly my stepmother arrives, and she came and she took him. She just came one day, knocked at the door, said, I'm coming to take him away, and she took him again. But in that time we were able to bring some truth across. We played him some of Oosterwald. I don't know if you remember Oosterwald's tapes, the things that had happened to him, and he was listening, and he was asking questions.
Did he go back before I came back or after I came back?
Before.
Before?
Yes, before you came back. He went back.
Okay, but when I came back from overseas, she told me all these things, and then there was something that I had to go and fetch at their house. And I didn't really want to go, but these are all lessons. If you have these lessons early on in your experience, then you know what you're up against. And so I had to go and fetch something at their house, and she had cursed our children and cursed her. And, doesn't matter, because a curse doesn't alight anyway, the Bible says. So I went to their house, and she was in audience. And I had to go and fetch something, and I had to wait for her to give it to me. I can't remember what it was. But again, I just went to fetch it. Went into the house, knocked on the door. She didn't answer. I knocked louder, and then this voice came. Said, "Who's there?" And I said, "It's me." And she says, "What do you want?" And I said, "I need to come and fetch this." "Well, come inside so long, I'll be there in a minute," or whatever. She was busy with her thing, and she doesn't move when that happens. And I was in a hurry. I had many things to do, and I went inside and I stood in the kitchen, and I still thought to myself, "Oh, now I've got to wait here. Get on with it, I'm German, I want it done right now." And I didn't pray when I went into that house. If you go into an occultist environment, you're going onto Satan's ground. You have to be protected. Even if you help someone, you have to ask God, "Help me, protect me against whatever," because of what happened to her. It's just reminders. Just stay focused. Remember where your help comes from. And I hadn't done that. And the next minute I get a blow in my side. My wind is completely gone. I went down like a ton of bricks. I lay writhing in pain on her kitchen floor. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. It's like someone had hit you with such a blow that your wind is gone. I couldn't get up, and I was writhing on the floor. And I'm saying, if she comes now and she sees me in this state, what will she think? She'll think that her entities are more powerful than God. I don't want that. So I'm desperately praying, and I'm saying, "Lord, help me to get back on my feet. I want to get up. I don't want her to see me like this. Your name will be dishonored." And I can't get up. I cannot get up. I cannot move. And I'm trying to get up, and I get onto one knee and I fall back onto the ground. I can't get up. And I hear her door opening in the passage. And it's not a very long passage. I don't know, a few meters or something. And it's about 3 bedrooms, so it's not a long passage. There's not a lot of time to get up now. And I'm in the kitchen. And I'm saying, "Lord, I want to get up." And I hear her coming, and she's halfway down the passage, and I can't get up. And I say, "I want to get up. Help me." And just before she comes around, I could get up. In terrible pain, but I could get up. And I pretended that there was nothing wrong. Could hardly breathe. And I said, "Yes, fine, thank you very much. And I need this and that." And I went and got it and whatever. And I went out there, and I got out of there. These lessons served a very important purpose, because what we were going to face later was going to be 10 times worse than what we faced there. And what was there on a 1-to-1 scale was going to be on a massive scale. So God was gracious to us, and He taught us these lessons very early on.
And I think that practical experience was just something that a lot of people don't get. They hear stories, but they don't have to experience it one-on-one. But in your case, you did have to.
Yes.
And it I believe, helped you solidify your faith, did it not?
Absolutely. And when you come up against opposition, you know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
And you know where your help is coming from too. But we needed some more lessons, and we can talk about them another time.
We'll talk about it another time. Today, we're done. We're going to have to take another break. And we thank you for joining us. Please join us again for continuing fascinating stories with Walter and Sonica Veith.